this is for frontliners. We've moved. I think we've got quite a lot of in-depth content there. I think there's some advice. And again, moving on from that, what's your opinion of ROPA, legislation mandating the qualification of agents for those who aren't quite sure what it is?
Me too.
The regulation, regulation of property agents.
Yes, the regulation of property agents. This is something that's been talked about for quite a number of years. Where are we actually at with it, and what's your opinion?
It's stalled because there's been a few things going on in politics. I don't know if you noticed over the last few weeks and months. So it's still on the parliamentary agenda, apparently, but has been pushed to one side. I guess it depends who the housing secretary is going to be, as time goes on, because it's a bit of a revolving door. But it's happening.
Where do we stand on it, though? Because I come from, my background is working in HR, and you start working in HR, you know that to be taken seriously, you have to be CIPD qualified, and you don't get beyond a certain level generally without doing that. And that, you're interviewing someone that's gone through that qualification, that they've upheld a certain level of understanding of what they do. And so from that perspective, I can see lots of value in doing that.
I think it's incomprehensible that the estate agency industry is not licensed. I think it's absolutely ridiculous. Now, there's always a danger of being over-licensed and over-regulated like the financial services sector. But for people that are tasked with looking after people's biggest asset, and that's a cliche, but it's true, the fact that you can be a carpenter or a taxi driver on a Monday and set up as an estate agent the next day with no checks and balances, no hoops that you have to jump through, either regulatory, although obviously there are some regs, we know there are, consumer protection regs, Estate Agents Act and so on. The Estate Agents Act now is 40 years old. It's not been amended for 40 years. And the fact that not just the regulation oversight doesn't really exist, notwithstanding the good work that the Ombudsman does and PRS and so on before the comments start flying. But it's not just regulation in terms of compliance. To me, it's a knowledge problem. Now, I reckon, and I'm quite happy to be tested on this, ask 100 estate agents basic questions about estate agency rules, regs, law, and so on that benefit the consumer. A large proportion would not know the answer.
I'd agree with that.
As in putting offers forward, timely fashion, in writing, and so on. Only not do so in certain circumstances. Are you allowed to do what some of the big corporates do? Of course, still being reported, where they're forcing mortgage referrals, conveyancing referrals on consumers and so on. There's a whole bunch of things that I think the estate agency sector is largely ignorant on, because there is no licensing, and because licensing, if it were to exist, should also include knowledge tests and have teeth, on the basis that if you're a bad agent, if you do bad things, you should absolutely be thrown out of the industry, or at least suspended from the industry. The fact that we don't have that in place, I think, is absolutely scandalous.
And why don't we, do you think?
Why don't we? Because the government have no appetite.
Because we've been talking about this from...
Well, can I tell you what? I won't mention his name. What a former minister told me. He said it doesn't win votes. That was his answer to why they don't, because bearing in mind, in parliamentary time, they have room, each parliament, for about 20 to 25 pieces of what you would call primary legislation, so stuff that doesn't get changed by way of statutory instrument. When you've got so many things going on, particularly now, it's just not a priority to government, because, in his words, it doesn't win us any votes. It's a terrible explanation, but that's the reality.
I heard probably 20 years ago, because it came, I think, close-ish 20 odd years ago, and they decided it was that if there was too many barriers to entry, it would be bad for the consumer.
But there should be some.
I'd be interested to hear if anyone disagrees with.
I'm all in. Well, I'm ignorant to it, so you might be able to educate me on it. But what problem would it solve?
Quality, integrity, honesty, transparency.
But all of those things.
But at the moment,
and it would drive fees up, Mark, is my contention.
That's not a problem.
It's a problem for the industry.
It's not a problem for the consumer wants.
Transparency.
I'm not against it. I struggle with it in a sense that going way back, I'm sure it's very different now, but going way back, I worked as an estate agent, and then I went over to financial services, and financial services even back then was like, you got to the point you can't even give good advice.
Yeah, you got to be careful what you wish for.
And so, like, it's a very tricky one. You don't have to over-regulate. What is it that an estate agent's doing at the moment whereby someone is actually like, you know,
Being harmed.
being significantly damaged by
I think we are,
that
well,
needs that
yeah.
that legislation.
I mean, we can be. They come down like a ton of bricks if we do. If AML and false offers.
But yeah, AML is slightly different. But how many agents have been prosecuted under the Estate Agents Act in the last 10 years? I bet it's none.
But that's what I mean. Like, so, and you mentioned a lot of companies are breaking it. So, is this going to do anything?
Yes, because if an agent isn't overseen, regulated, supervised, and isn't therefore as a consequence their behaviour is not better, then how can that be in the best interest of the consumer? So it might not be they're doing anything wrong, but if you as a branch manager of XYZ corporate estate agent doesn't understand that you have to put every offer forward, or there has to be in writing so that it's clear and transparent, and that you can't favour someone's offer just because they're doing their mortgage through you. If you don't know that as an estate agent, you are not doing the consumer justice.
So would the solution be let's actually police the Estate Agency Act? Would that?
No. I think there needs to be a separate licensing regime.
But why not? Why not?
Well, because it hasn't worked very well for the last 40 years.
Because no one's policed it.
There's no
No one's
policing.
policed
though.
it. But you can't police an act now that was written before the internet was.
But who's going to
invented.
police the roper?
Well, no, that's the question. And look, some would say, so the NAA, Property Mart would like it to be them.
Of course.
I'm sure the Guild would like it to be them. I'm sure, and look, all that's fine.
Probably
not. All that's fine. But I don't think we should say no to licensing because we don't know who's going to police it. That's a bit like saying we shouldn't have laws around shoplifting because there's no police about. I mean, you know, we should find someone. It's not a good argument. We should find a regime, if you want to call it that, bit of a heavy word, that, you know, and obviously you'd have to pay into it, right? So it'll be self-funding in terms of that regulatory mechanism. We have to do it for the sake of the consumer.
It's really easy to police because you link paycheck to purpose, and you instruct the lawyers can only actually pay a fee if there is a registration certificate that goes alongside the negotiator.
Oh, listen, I don't doubt that we would be able to police is everybody working in an estate agency registered and licensed, but whether they then follow the rules.
Yeah, but there'd be a complaint system, right? So if you're a seller that's agreed,
But we've got the
It's now.
TPO.
No, but at the moment, so the ombudsman, you know, can award compensation. The NAA can kind of wrap you over the knuckles, but no one's got the power to stop you being an estate agent unless there are very, very serious circumstances
what
where you
about-
get banned by way of the Companies Act, for instance. But there's not enough that says we would like you to pass a test every 3 years, Sarah, just to make sure that you actually do know the industry. Mark, Adam, Peter, what the hell is wrong with that? We are dealing with enormous amounts of money, people's lives and livelihoods. I think it's absolute no-brainer.
To be clear, I didn't say I didn't agree with it
But
or
do
that
you-
there was
do you
something
agree with
wrong with it. Listen, anything that professionalises our industry and gives us all more credibility in the eyes of the consumer. I go back to some of my previous points around the trust element. Your point, Gemma, absolutely. You know, sometimes it can really help if they know that you have had to, you know,
You have to work to standards
correct
that are prescribed.
So for all of those reasons, I really agree with it. I have had some involvement, it's sort of pre-pandemic, just into the early pandemic, of the apprenticeship scheme that was set up. And it gets very out of date very quickly. The standards that are created by people who are not at what I would consider to be the forefront of the industry, and so it's or even in the innovative part of the industry. So all we're getting is sort of like old stuff that's being regurgitated. So do I think there is a need for the estate agents to be licensed and to undertake qualifications? Yes, but I think we've got to be very careful about how that is delivered and really certainly how it's policed.
I think one element that could be really positive from anything like this is the concept of CPD, so continuing professional development.
Agreed.
And you know, that's something, if you're a lawyer, you know, you are expected, in order to continue to practice law, you have to demonstrate a certain number of hours per year in continuing professional development. So not only have you demonstrated when you got your law degree and you did your training that you were fit to be a lawyer, you've demonstrated during the next however many years that you continue to be fit to be a lawyer, you continue to practice your craft, you're keeping up to date with standards. And I think just an arbitrary qualification would probably frustrate a lot of people. But if there was something in it which, encouraged people to be better and to continue to develop and continue to learn and continue to innovate, that could be really powerful.
Regularly also in the bottom 5 for most trusted people are lawyers. I mean, it's just a question of like what.
Yeah.
I'm not against it, so I don't want to get into an argument of like, well, surely it makes logical sense, but I just don't know if it actually solves the problem that it's supposed to be solved.
Because wrong uns will always be wrong uns, frankly, if they've got a license at the moment.
You mentioned
Not
about
many
the
wrong
HR
uns.
There's not, but then there's a mechanism.
HR people are
But
brilliant.
there's a mechanism then to get rid of the wrong ones.
And we have that mechanism now. You read agents are banned, sure, but well,
Tiny, because there's not the oversight in my view, and there's not the mechanism to ensure that it's not. See, transgression and punishing transgression is too late. That's after the problem. What we should be doing is ensuring
people that push the ban.
But we should be
In any
ensuring
industry.
surely a knowledge and a training and an experience that can be proven so that the problems don't happen in the first place. Surely that would be good for the consumer. Do you know, we did a survey fairly recently of agents and asked how many actually favoured licensing, and it was astonishing to me that 20% of agents don't think we should be licensed. Now, I would argue that they're the 20% we shouldn't have in the industry
Let's do a vote here. So do we all believe?
in some form.
So what we know today, are we for or against it? Rover.
100%. Notwithstanding detail.
In detail.
The detail, we don't know the detail, but let's move on because I think
that that's the logical. No one's going to have a go at you for saying
You're
yes.
for it.
I think we should be for licensing. They're only going to have a go for the idea that you've gone. Well, I don't think you should be locked because that's not logical. It's
Yeah,
like
it's
that's crazy. You're insane. But like, what's the actual problem? An estate agent doesn't get paid unless he manages to please the seller and the buyer to the point where they both complete the transaction. Other than that, you don't stand to
Free.
lose anything financially from me doing a crap job.
Well, you don't think the consumer does?
No.
That's 100% not right.
I think
That's
you're
100% not right.
Okay, but
See, if I sell your house to my mate who's £5,000 less than your other offer, even though that's actually a breach of the Estate Agents Act, but there's no real mechanism to stop it, and I would just plead ignorance. I'd say, sorry, I didn't know I could do that, I couldn't do that as an estate agent. That's where the knowledge test comes in. So there's absolutely a real world detriment in financial terms for the consumer if the agent doesn't have either the oversight or the experience and the knowledge to do the job properly, in my opinion.
Can I just answer your question? Because you did say to me, well, you used the HR example, but does that not mean, surely there are crap HR people? I think there are less crap HR people because I think there's an expectation, and doing the HR qualification is hard, and people flunk out on it, can't be bothered, and choose a different career path. So I think there would be more crap HR people if there wasn't a qualification.
The only good HR people that can be bothered to do hours and hours of study, right? Because I couldn't be bothered to do hours and hours of study, but I might be a brilliant HR person. You don't know, I might be crap at it as well, but it's just. I'm just not sure that's
the exception to the rule, where if you are brilliant, you can be a brilliant HR person without studying because you show up every day and you prove that you're brilliant without the qualification. There's still room.
There's some good dialogue there. I'm gonna, if you don't mind, move on for time purposes. So